Hello, everyone. Welcome. Okay, how many people here have been to a live podcast taping before? A few. And especially like there's bright lights, so really, if you're in the front row, you're a few. After that, you might have all seen one, but I can't tell. Okay, I'm gonna go over a couple housekeeping before we start. So we are going to be taping this panel live for our show, which is called Start Podcast, and we'll have it up on the screen in a minute here. Start Podcast is a podcast started by Matt Miller and myself, Margaux Miller, and we interview startups in the Canadian Prairies. We started the show to really bring attention to the amazing companies coming out of the prairies, many of which we have on stage with us here right now, and just to have one more platform to really showcase the awesome things that we have going on here. So when we get started, we are going to be recording live, like I said. So as far as your contribution as an audience, there is, in fact, another mic that's in the audience, so we can capture your sounds. So you are absolutely allowed to laugh, you're allowed to clap, you're allowed to participate as an audience, and then we'll capture that and have that in the show that you can find on all major podcast platforms. Just look up Start Space Podcast, type in both words, and you'll find us. And so we are going to run the intro in just a minute, and when we do, we'll launch right into it. You'll hear us kind of go in. After I do a little introduction of all of our panelists, I'm going to welcome you, the audience, and then you're all allowed to clap. So I'll do one of these. Let's practice. Welcome to our audience. They did so good, first try. Okay, is everyone ready? Audio, let's run the show.
Welcome to Start, an Innovation Alley podcast.
Where my left-brain brother Matt Miller
And my right-brain sister Margaux Miller
will cover the A to Z of starting a business here in the Canadian Prairies.
Within Innovation Alley, we believe that the biggest and brightest ideas can come from anyone, and with a little support, can grow into businesses that stand on a global scale.
And we're here to show you the proof and provide the resources to help you start.
Each episode, we talk to founders of Manitoba startups to hear their stories of success, failure, and lessons learned.
If you want to stay in the know about inspiring local entrepreneurs, or if you're looking to create a business yourself, be sure to subscribe to our podcast, Start.
Welcome, everyone, to this unique episode of Start Podcast. First things first, we are missing my co-host Matt Miller today, as he is getting ready to head to Australia to work on the design of a hydropower generating facility. And yet, that is not the most exciting news we have, because we are in fact recording this episode today live in Winnipeg, Manitoba at Disrupted. Yes! So Disrupted is a tech conference that is about the future of work and how humans are not just going to survive, but thrive in this age of disrupted technology. And so with us today on the show, we have 4 absolutely amazing guests from tech companies that were founded in the Canadian Prairies. And so I'm going to tell you a bit about each of these companies, so listen carefully to this part, and then we'll get right into it. First, I have Chuck Loewen. Chuck is the founder of Online Business Systems. They're a company now of about 350 employees between Canada and the US. They're North America's leading digital transformation and cybersecurity consultancy. So, in other words, they're a business and IT consulting firm, and they have very sophisticated cybersecurity offerings. They are also currently ranked the 5th of the 50 best places to work in all of Canada. We also have Carly Shuler with us today. Carly is the co-founder and CEO of Hoot Reading. They're at about 46 employees, and some of those are teachers that are temporary workers with them. We'll talk about that in the show in a minute. But they're a cutting-edge international ed tech startup. And what they're doing is providing one-to-one online tutoring that connect kids to skilled teachers in order to practice reading over video chat. And Carly, by the way, holds a master's in tech, innovation, and education from the Harvard Grad School of Education. Next, we have Wade Barnes. Wade is the CEO of Farmers Edge. They have surpassed 600 employees now, most of which are in Canada, but they also are in US, Australia, Brazil, Russia, and Ukraine. And they are a digital agriculture and data solutions company. They're working on precision agriculture, helping farmers grow more precisely by using innovative farming platforms, and they leverage a lot of data science and artificial intelligence, and are also currently on Forbes' 25 most innovative ag tech startups list. Finally, we have Jay Myers. Jay is one of the co-founders and is the current VP of Growth at Bold Commerce. They're at about 350 employees in Canada and just expanded into Austin. So you'll hear more news about that. And as one of the fastest growing tech companies in Manitoba, Bold is an e-commerce specialist, and they are providing a suite of solutions for basically any e-commerce challenge that you might have. They are also a numerous award winner and are on the list of the top 50 fastest growing companies in Canada. Okay, and finally, I want to welcome the final member of our group today, which is the audience. Okay, so to the four of you, I'm so glad that you could join us here today for our first official live taping of Start Podcast. So let's get into, I want to just know, tell me in a general sense, what's it like growing a tech company in the Canadian Prairies specifically?
I'll start. I mean, when we got started, Farmers Edge was a precision agriculture company. We were consulting. We weren't really a tech company. And as we sort of changed how the company was to move it towards sort of a data focus, I mean, I would say it was really difficult. You know, we went out and raised some of our first capital out of Silicon Valley, and with a really well-known venture capital group. And we were the first company that they had ever invested into in Canada. And sort of there was this view that as quickly as they invested, they would have rather moved us into Silicon Valley, because you might not know this, but all the smart people in the world are in Silicon Valley.
Right, of course,
there are no smart people
None.
in the Prairies or in Winnipeg, and it was a real big issue. I mean, they viewed that there was no talent, that maybe if you were in Waterloo or Vancouver, but really at the end of the day, that what could you do in Winnipeg? And so it was a real challenge. Luckily we had a really strong board that tried to focus these folks on, like, look, the Prairies is the heart of agriculture, and there's a lot of talent here in Winnipeg and the Prairies, and companies like Bold and Skip have really proven that. And so I would say for us, part of it is the tech community didn't really understand agriculture all that much. I would say that the venture capitalists didn't want us to be here, and I would say to a certain degree at those early stages, in 2014, 2015, I would say banks didn't understand how to lend to tech companies in Canada compared to the U.S. I would say that the government with resources, were much more focused on trying to support, somebody that was building a tractor to ship it overseas rather than support a fledgling tech company. And so I would say that there's a lot that's changed in the last few years, but at the time when we got started, I would say it was really difficult. And to a degree, you could really see why a lot of the talent or the tech companies were moving south. And I think that's changed now, but it wasn't easy in the beginning.
And having groups like all of you that have decided to stay here, that really have a main hub in Winnipeg or in Manitoba, that helps us at the same time. Like, you had to make that hard decision to stay. And I know pretty much all of you have had some outside funding. Was that a point where you felt the most pressure?
I believe that we would not be where we are in a lot of other cities. I actually think a lot of our success was because we started this in Winnipeg. There's a lot of advantages. There's advantages to being in Silicon Valley and the tech hubs, but I think being in Winnipeg, we got to, our competitors are New York and San Francisco and all over the world, and we're competing on a world stage from Winnipeg, and we could be 200 people for the same cost as maybe like 50 or 60 people in San Francisco with 100% of the talent. If you want to argue 99%, maybe there's like a sliver of very specialty roles that are maybe hard to find in Winnipeg, but the bulk of really good talent is here. So I think it was a competitive advantage for us. We were able to grow faster. And I kept hearing from our competitors, like, holy cow, how are you growing this fast? We're competing and we're still 17 people and you're 50 and we're 20 and now you're 100. Like, well, it's cheaper doing business here and the talent's just as good. So it was a huge advantage for us. And to answer your question about when we did receive funding last year, there was a little bit of pressure, but I think maybe 1 or 2 board meetings that kind of died down a little bit. And, we recently, you mentioned we opened an office in Austin. That was strictly because of the person. We interviewed people in Vancouver, Toronto, one from San Francisco, one from Austin. And our mindset around it was we wanted to find the right person and build a team around that person. He happened to be from there. But like our hub will always be Winnipeg. That'll be a small extension. So
I mean, I think it's changed a lot. Like in 2014, when we raised that round from Kleiner Perkins, there really wasn't a venture capital, tech venture capital group in Canada. Like Georgian Partners was just sort of coming on the scene. They started to do some deals, and round 13 was just sort of coming on the scene, and there wasn't many. Today, there's a lot more, but at that time, I mean, if you wanted to raise money, you had to go south to really find, because there was just so many of them. But again, today's a different day.
They're starting to notice now. And if you take nothing else from the show today, we had Jay just say that being in Manitoba with your business was a competitive advantage. And I think we need to remember that locally often, right? Because it's easy to hear all these stories of tough and difficulties here, but you guys are great examples, and that's a great quote from you, Jay, so thank you.
Do you ever get the issue, though, when you're trying to win a deal, maybe that they say, well, where are you based out of? And you say, Winnipeg. Yeah. Where's Winnipeg? Like, do you ever feel that that they look at you if you're trying to do a deal with somebody in London or wherever it is, and they go like, well, there's no, like, that's not a tech hub.
This will sound crazy, but when the Jets came back, that actually helped that.
I'd agree. Yeah.
Like that was an opening conversation. We could be talking to someone, they heard about the Jets. And when we had that playoff run and everyone was on the streets, that was like the beginning of, the little 5 minute of
everybody was
banter
watching.
and the sales.
Yeah.
That honestly actually put us on the map. Like,
now, Chuck, you're in the U.S. too, and across Canada. Have you run into any of this? What's it been like for you scaling and growing?
I'll just comment on the Jets thing. I was during the playoff run in Hoboken, New Jersey, and a bunch of us are watching the Jets game on TV, and a guy came up to me and he says, "Are you guys actually from Winnipeg? I want to shake your hand. I've never met anybody from Winnipeg before." And so it was super exciting.
Did you sign his an autograph?
Well, he didn't ask that far, but had we won the cup, probably would have come back for it. So, we started in the mid-'80s. That's a long time ago. It's kind of a different era than some of the others. And venture cap just wasn't something we even thought of, and it just wasn't available. And so you kind of, did it the old-fashioned way of however you could just, constant trend was how to get enough money to make payroll because the future looks so good, but you got to get through the short term to get to the long term. We've hired just countless people from University of Calgary, from University of Saskatchewan, from U of M, and they are rock stars. Like you can compete with that caliber of anywhere else in Canada or the US. About 16, 17 years ago or so, I was at a conference in Silicon Valley, and one of the VP of HR from eBay was speaking. And he said, "Oh, what a gong show it is to be to business in Silicon Valley, because they couldn't attract staff because they weren't the sexiest thing." And he says in Silicon Valley is you have more stock options, or you have a better story, and your staff just leave. And I thought, oh my God, thank goodness we're not in Silicon Valley.
Right.
And so
it's a different kind of pressure.
Yes.
And that is interesting. And Jay, you mentioned too, like you've found amazing source of talent here. You guys have recruited internationally and done different things, but people are willing to come here, and there's a lot of good talent already here. But so in general, across the board, as you've scaled, and Carly, you guys are like 6 full-time employees, but you have to hire remote teachers for your platform, right? How are you finding scaling from the people perspective, the people side of things?
I mean, at Hoot Reading, we really are a people business more than we're a tech business. We connect kids with real classroom teachers to read together over our app. And so scaling from a human perspective is probably more challenging than scaling from a tech perspective. And I think that's one of the reasons that podcasts like yours and conferences like this are so important for startups here in the Prairies, because the truth is we don't have the global stage that places like Toronto or the Valley have. We're also very humble. You know, we have a lot of success stories. Bold, Skip, 24/7 InTouch. We've grown a lot of incredible businesses here, but we don't tend to shout about ourselves from the rooftops as much. So, you know, especially we're building a consumer business. We're not ag, we're not B2B. We are building a consumer brand. So taking the time to shout out about what we're doing at Hoot Reading is really beneficial to us. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, and Wade, from your side, I was kind of wondering, you guys have artificial intelligence, you're using information of things, IoT, and so when we had a presenter earlier in the conference that was talking a bit about recruiting tools and how artificial intelligence is becoming part of that. Seeing as you guys are comfortable with artificial intelligence, is that something you're considering? Would you consider using AI in hiring practices as you continue to grow?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, when it comes to people that are focused in tech, you know, a lot of them are looking to put their mark in the world, you know, and so I think we're a little bit lucky because what we're doing, we are, you know, significantly disrupting agriculture. You know, we're moving it from a traditional sense to, you know, very data-driven, which, you know, the spin-offs of that is the change around, you know, the environmental footprint, you know, how we're growing food, how we're changing farming practices in different parts of the world, so I think that in itself attracts people because it's unique, it's different. Specifically, you know, if you have been in Silicon Valley or one of the tech hubs, and you know, to be able to kind of come in and say, hey, you know what, we're gonna reduce the amount of fertilizer we put on farmland, and it's going to make a big difference into the environment. That's you know, pretty meaningful. So I think, yeah, you know, the ability also of being able to showcase some of the things that you can bring to life. And also take on the big guys. Like, you know, our major competitors are these little companies called Monsanto, John Deere. You know, we always you know, say, hey, you know, don't you want to take on these evil bastards from Monsanto? And that you know, I hope there's nobody here from Monsanto.
You can edit that out of the show, Wade.
So I mean, I think that is, you know, it attracts people, but we're diverse because we have agronomy people that are on the ground that works with growers that actually tests a lot of our models. We have salespeople, and then we have, you know, data scientists and devs, and so it's a real mixed bag. So you get quite a mixture of different philosophies. You know, if you go into the U.S., I mean, I would say it's kind of funny. Some of, you know, even politically, where you know, some of our core guys that work out in the field, they're you know, pretty big Trump supporters, and I wouldn't say some of our devs, they have a little bit different political leanings, and it's kind of a bit of a melting pot inside of Farmers Edge. So.
Well, and one thing throughout the vein of this conference that's really come up often is hiring people in tech who have actually creativity skills, because we're starting to realize that like tech isn't just, you know, one type of person, that in fact, as we move forward, the difference that we're going to need in our companies to survive as a tech company is in fact ensuring that we do have that human side of tech that this conference really is focused on. So have you seen any changes in your hiring practice to include more of finding the right people who have that creativity and those soft skills as well?
Absolutely. Well, two things. I want to actually just touch on the scaling from a people perspective.
Yeah, please.
Because this is something we actually screwed up quite bad. And, you know, when you're growing a company, things crash and burn, and then you fix them. Like we had our servers in 2013 on Black Friday crash, and it's like this story around the office. In 2015, I would say we had a bit of a culture crash, and we had to give a lot of thought to how do we scale it if we're going to grow? Because when we were, I think we got to about like 50 people, and you know, when you're insulated in a small group in one room, you're around the founders. Everyone's going to think alike and act alike and make decisions alike. But then as you grow and you're in different buildings in different countries and different cities and different offices, I mean, there's some people that I don't see on a daily basis. So how do you get that to scale? That's something we've thought a ton about, and I don't know if you want. I have some thoughts on it.
Please.
So what we've done, this has been the key for us, and we've broken it down into, because we believe culture is like a shared set of beliefs that define how you make decisions. Essentially, it's the personality of your company. And so to get to 350 people now, I would say our culture is better now than it was when it was 60 people. And so what we've really worked hard on is three things, and that's defining it, giving access to it, and then modeling and reinforcing it. And so when I think about defining it, culture, it's like telephone. When someone says, the game telephone, by the time it gets to the end, it's different.
Yep.
There we go. That's like culture. Like your founders will have it and your core group will have it, but how does the person who starts today have it and have the same understanding of what those values are? So we spent a lot of time defining what, am I cutting it out?
You're good.
Okay, I'm leaning on the thing here, so. So like there's every company has kind of like core values of what they believe it might be. Innovation's a value, or respect is a value, or learning is a value, or whatever it is. And then they define that a certain way. So if you take respect, for example, respect might mean treat others kindly and value all ideas the same, let's just say. So that's how your company defines it. Another company might define it differently, but that's your cultural definition of that term. And so you need to have a cultural definition, what it means, and then give access to it. So on a daily basis, how is that worked into your we call it our builder's code, but it's like, it's in our one-on-ones, and it's in our annual reviews, it's up on the wall. When we give wow cards on Fridays, it's because they represented a certain trait, like it's in everything. And then modeling and reinforcing it. This is something that I was thinking about this the other week. As companies scale, I think one of the biggest things that gets ignored or not paid attention to is middle management. That is probably the most important layer in a company, is middle management, and they are the lifeblood of companies, and they are the ones that model your culture. They teach. They are the ones that appreciate the staff. Like, you might not have time to talk to everyone, but if you have middle managers, give them the tools they need, give them the resources, give them the training, invest in them as much as you can, because they will be what allow you. They're the foundation. It's not the executive team that's the foundation. It's that middle management that will allow you to scale to thousands. Once you have a strong layer there.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's been really key for us from scaling on the people side. Because
I think that's helpful. And we have had people this week say, like, codify your culture, write it down, do something where you're demonstrating it and you're making it accessible. So I think that's really good advice. Chuck, one thing I read in some notes that I got about you guys in advance of this is that one thing that you try and do at Online Business Systems is really to treat everyone, including your team, clients, like friends. But I kind of wonder, how do you push that down or pull that up? How do you make sure that everyone in your company is treating people like friends?
Further to what Jay was saying is you define the culture, you codify the culture, and then I have 8 reports, and they need to know exactly what we're doing, exactly what I'm thinking, what the other executives are thinking, and they need to be very aligned. And then together with them, we push down to that middle layer. And they need to know that, I don't want each of them to know, or I want each of them to know, or to think, what would Chuck do? Not necessarily that they need to do that, but at least to know me well enough and to know our company's beliefs well enough, so that they can say, good, Chuck might do this, but this is also aligned and this is the way I want to take it, and totally respect that. And so, to treat people like friends is let them make sure they understand the culture, what we stand for, and then make sure that they know we have their back always, and help them. We have a goal of ours is to give each person a great, rewarding career, and so we have career mentors assigned to each person, and our people move from one area to the other and so on, but where possible, their career mentor stays consistent and always guides them, and so these people feel like this is a family, they belong to something. And that's how you kind of treat them like friends.
And a career mentor sounds like a great idea. And if you remember when I introduced Chuck, I did mention that they were most recently ranked 5th on the 50 best companies to work in Canada, and that's a very high number on that list to achieve, because you guys have been on it before at different numbers. So obviously what you're doing is working here. Carly, I wanted to know from you too, you've got 40 or so currently remote employees and growing. So do you have an idea of how you're going to make sure culture is passed to these people that aren't in front of you every day?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it is a challenge that we deal with. I think one interesting thing about us is Hoot. I mean, we're smaller and we're younger than you guys up here. We've only been around 18 months, but when we started, we're ultimately a marketplace, and who our supply was going to be for teaching, we could have gone a lot of different ways. We could have gone with teachers. We also could have gone with EAs. We could have hired, university students and trained them on how to teach kids. And ultimately, we decided to go for real classroom teachers, and that means that everybody that we hire to be a Hoot reading teacher is actually a teacher. They work in a classroom every day. And I think that alone, even though it makes our product a little bit more expensive, has been huge in defining the culture of the supply side of our marketplace.
And then they know they're part of something too where they can trust the other teachers because they know there's a
right.
certain level of criteria with what they're participating in.
That's right.
Okay, I want to talk about actually the culture itself now because we've talked about scaling and how you do that. So, I know for a fact, Jay, that you guys have ping pong tables, you've had beer, since you were in Ile-des-Chênes, you had this kind of stuff, beer kegs and things like that. You moved to the city, you keep that as part of your culture. There are examples in the city, though, of companies that you walk in there and they say, if you want a job here, by the way, that's not our environment. We're not that kind of tech company. But that is kind of the sexy, cool way when people think about working at big, interesting tech companies. So has that made a big difference for you guys? Was there ever a point where you thought, actually, maybe we don't need this, time, or the profit for value, as far as what or cost for value, as far as what you're contributing to that?
You need ping pong tables to have a successful software company. Quote that.
All right, interview done. Yeah.
It's interesting that you asked that because I'll just say this, that yes, we have a lot of fun perks. That's not culture. So that's like the gyms and the VR rooms and the catered lunches and the beer kegs and whatever. I see that more as appreciation. We're doing some more cool things this year. But it's absolutely not culture. And that's one of the things we tell our staff day one. We'll do the best we can to have fun perks in the office. Never mistake that for culture. Culture is, like you were saying that you have 8 people that kind of march in the same beat as you. You can walk in a company and I can tell you in 2 seconds if they have good culture or bad culture. I can ask someone, hey, can I do this thing? And if they have to refer to a policy book or they aren't able to answer the question without consulting a manager, they have bad culture. Culture is when, in the absence of managers or leadership, you have strong principles that can guide your decisions and you can operate. And it sounds like you have that with yours, and to us, that's culture. Principles over policy, so you can, and then it's your whole shared belief system. But I will say this, there's a lot of data that happy employees do better work. So it's not culture, but I do think it's important. I do think it's important to have ability. There was a study that a university did that happy employees are 12% more productive, and actually unhappy employees are 10% less. So that's a delta of 22%. And there was a Gallup poll they did of 142 countries that 63% of employees in North America say they are not engaged with the company they work with. 24% say they're actively disengaged. And only 13% of employees currently in North America say they are engaged with the company they work at. So it's not just important to have a place where people enjoy work. It's a strategic business thing where people do better work. It's a competitive advantage because really your people are all you are. And so it's not culture. We make sure people don't get that wrong. But I'll say this. The catered lunches that we do every day is the best investment you can ever do because I can't tell you how many times our calendars are full and someone wants to meet and they just say, oh, well, we'll grab lunch together. And we go and we have lunch because it's instead of eating at your desk or eating out, it's probably the most productive hour in the day cross-departmentally. If I want to go and talk to someone or this, you go and you sit at the table with them. Or
yeah, I've experienced that before too. That is great.
Yeah,
Carly,
I
think you wanted to jump in here.
I want to give you a little bit I'm going to rib you a little bit. You said we could do that. So I love what you guys are up to, obviously, and I think ping pong tables, I have nothing against them. But I will say that there are a whole lot of corporate perks that are not looked at through a diversity lens. So most perks,
yes.
Gyms, ping
Yes.
pong tables, video game rooms, those were all great when I was in my 20s. But as a company that was founded by 2 40-year-old moms, suddenly those things that were perks and were fun actually tend to disinclude you sometimes from a culture. And again, I have nothing
100%.
wrong with ping pong tables, but we're announcing a really sexy project with a tech company in Toronto who is offering Hoot Reading as a corporate perk to show their employees that they care about their children, they care about literacy.
Yes.
And so I think, again, if you want to have a diverse culture, perks are great, but make sure you have perks. It's good to have ping pong tables if you want people who like that, but also make sure you have perks that are maybe for the working mom who might want something else.
Yeah, that's really good.
Thanks, Carly. Okay, we are going to do something fun now. This is called our speed round, and if you've listened to our show before, you will have heard this one, and we're going to do it still here live today. So, how we do this is I ask some rapid fire questions, and our panel answers with one word or a few words in a relatively quick manner. So, are you ready? Good, okay. Question number 1. Describe your business in one word.
Chaos.
Growing.
Evolving.
Adaptable.
Describe yourself in one word.
Chaos.
Disorganized.
Consistent.
I try to be authentic.
What do you suck at?
Chaos.
I think I used disorganized, which was my answer for this question. So, see, disorganized.
Operational management.
I suck at hard conversations,
Okay.
but I'm working on it.
Good. What keeps you up at night?
Chaos.
Wait, you can do it. Something else.
Change.
My kids, literally.
Sales.
Yeah, my kids as well, and ideas. I don't know, like my brain.
Funding.
Funding.
Funding, yeah, fair. Yeah. Okay, this might be similar, but let's try and be creative here. What's the hardest part of working or running a tech company or working in tech?
The hardest part for me is shutting down products or projects, and that's just like a part of tech. You try things and you fail fast, and it sucks when you, as a team, when you're like working on something for a year and then it's just not catching on, and then we say, okay, we're going to shut this down. Like the people working on that project, it really sucks, but it's kind of part of the industry. So, yeah.
The pace. That's it's
Yeah, tech is moving fast.
that everything's about pace, and you have to move at that pace or you're dead.
Anyone else?
Focus. There's so many opportunities where, as a small team, where you're going to focus your time.
I'm going to copy pace as well.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. What is the best way for you to relax?
Wine.
Whiskey. Yeah.
Just different types of alcohol. Yeah, good.
If I'm smart enough and I leave my cell phone by the door and I just play with my kids I just disconnect.
Good one.
Yeah.
During the day, going for a walk, and probably in the evening, a glass of wine.
Yeah, I think when you're at a computer all day, right, we forget to get up and do that. Okay, last one. How will tech improve the future?
In one word?
You can use a sentence. That's a hard one.
It might not.
Oh.
Interesting, Wade.
At one of my classes, you mentioned I went to the Harvard Ed School. A teacher said that one of my professors said that one of the greatest advantages of technology is to bridge distance and to bridge time. So when you look at education, for example, you can bring teachers into the homes of kids that they otherwise wouldn't be able to be at. But ultimately, it's still the teachers, it's still the humans. It's just using tech to sometimes bring humans together.
Yeah.
I know in agriculture, all the things that we do and create, it's going to create better efficiency, better for the environment, but it's going to create larger farms, right? It'll be a more corporate style culture of agriculture 30 or 40 years down and coming from the farm. I do at times think, is that a good thing or not? I don't know. I know there's no changing it. You can't not do it, but in the end, 50 years back, will we be better off where we'll be in agriculture, where it's very focused on tech? I think the jury will be out on that. So,
In most cases, it levels the playing field and it moves it from capital to almost everybody can participate. And so I think there's obviously some outliers and some places where the very wealthy will be able to exploit benefit of tech more than others, but it's a leveling of the playing field.
Yeah, eventually. I mean, we have a program at Tech Manitoba about giving classes to low-income and underrepresented families who don't know how to use computers at all. So currently, it's actually a big divide. There's a big digital divide. So you're right. Eventually, it could be leveling, and for the education perspective, and there's ways that we can use it to bridge that gap. But in some ways, it's actually creating a bigger gap. So it is an interesting conversation, right?
Really.
Yeah, and I'm an eternal optimist, so I believe it's going to improve it. I think there might be aspects that is unknown with AI. There's the debates around that. But one thing that's comforting to me is when I look back at 100 years ago, probably 99% of industry was related around agriculture. And when that change, that shift with big machines, everyone thought, well, what are we going to do now? But now it's like maybe a couple percent, but we're okay. And 100 years before that, industry was around something else. And so it will replace, it will enhance, but we'll be doing different things around it. So I don't know what that is yet, but I'm optimistic it is going to be net good.
I just, in where I'm going is that people in the tech community always say, as we bring AI in, as we do all these things, it'll be better. And I always like to say to people that it may not be as good as you think. We tell ourselves that. So, but I'm like you. I'm an optimist too, and I think it has to be better. But we also, there will be some negatives to it too. It isn't going to be all
But
perfect.
it's gonna come down to the people like us and like you, the people who are working on the stuff, right? Like it's what you do with the technology that matters. It's not the technology itself. Like at Hoot Reading, originally our service was sold to families, and very quickly, Maya and I sat down and said, how are we gonna get this into the hands of kids who can't afford it? And so we rolled out at Boys and Girls Clubs across Canada, funded by Spin Master Toys as a corporate sponsor. Great for kids, great for our business, double bottom line, social impact and financial impact. And when you can grow a double bottom line business, then I think that ultimately tech will be used for good if it's part of your bottom line.
And that was, when you talk about people like us or getting the right minds in the room, part of the big conversation now is also, though, about ensuring that there's enough diversity in the room. So, you talk about artificial intelligence and things that are being created, and if they're only being created by one kind of person, this gap we're talking about could get bigger for others. So working on software and artificial intelligence, some of the other things that all of you, have in your products, is that something that you've been conscious of? And if you have you noticed a difference in the quality of the product by having those diverse minds in the room? And, diversity from all senses, culture, background, race, gender, all the above.
Well, we're fairly diverse as it is. So, I mean, like on our C-suite, 50% of our C-suite are females. So, we have kind of a rural urban divide. So most of our devs, I would say most of our data people are from an urban center. When you get out into the rural areas where our agronomy people are boots on the ground, they're from rural areas. So there's different thought processes, and you look at from different countries, different cultures. If you get out to the Midwest of the United States, it's pretty Caucasian. When you look at our dev group, it's probably from every different country that you can think about. So, it's for us, it's sort of unique that way. But our business is a little bit different because we touch the end user, and while we're also building the products. And I wouldn't say that some of the people that are building the products have any type of connection to the people that are the front line because they don't have that connectivity. We have to do a good job or a better job of always sort of making the people that are helping, develop the products understand who the customers are. Because if you've never been on a farm before, if you've never experienced agriculture, and you're in an office and Waterloo, you can get disconnected pretty quick.
Well, and that is a risk, right? We talk about built-in bias in the things that we're creating. So is there anyone else that has paid attention to this, or that has, a conversation worth sharing that your team's worked on to make sure that that's at the core of what you're doing?
One of the things we, a couple years ago, just like the language we used, we realized the word culture fit kept coming up, and we changed that to culture add. And looking at it through a different lens, like it's easy to get into this mindset that like this is our culture, this is what we are, and you have a super good point. Like, so now we look at what adds to our culture, shared values underneath of it. But this last year we went on 4 different recruiting missions to different countries: South America, Europe, Germany, Brazil, France, and they come over in waves. And it's always been about like 10 or 12 people. We meet them at the airport with a big sign and put bold hoodies on them. And some of them have never been to Canada in their life before, and they come over with their families and their kids. And having their views on things and the way they think and approach problems and discuss, and it's been a huge benefit and game changer having those diverse people there. Yeah.
I mean, for us, it's easy to think of yourself as being, oh, we've got diversity covered. We're 2 female founders, one of whom's a visible minority. We're on top of this. But recently, we signed a deal with a nonprofit called Right to Play, which brings after-school programs to Indigenous youth across the country. And in our original meetings, they said to us, so how many Indigenous teachers do you have? None. How many Indigenous books in your library of over 600 leveled readers do you have? None. And so sometimes you have to look in the mirror, and I think, I heard this at Move the Dial, which is a great diversity and tech conference in Toronto, which is having good intentions is not the same thing as being intentional. So it's not, of course we have good intentions, but we had to intentionally go out and find Indigenous teachers and intentionally go out and, bring Indigenous content into our library, or like you said, intentionally go out and do a culture add, not a culture fit. And so I think, you're always learning, right?
We don't have a diversity hiring policy or program. We just have a policy of what's the best person that we can get. And as it turns out, is we have just a broad range of people from different ages, different races, different religions, different aspects of their life. And so we become very diverse, but not because we're purposefully, intentionally diverse.
Right.
Okay, now on our show, typically we ask you guys to give general advice for entrepreneurs who are looking to start a business in the Prairies. And so far, you guys have given a lot of advice when you're already kind of underway and you're scaling, and some really good feedback on culture and what it means. But can you tell us, like in general, what would be some advice you would give to an entrepreneur or like a really early phase startup who is here in the Prairies and looking to kind of get things going?
I would say make sure that if you're going to raise capital, that first venture capital group you pick, you're really careful with. You want to make sure that because that really sets the tone to where the company moves. Those would probably generally be your first board. They'll try to influence a lot of where the company's going to go. And sometimes if you're a small startup, you don't necessarily, the VCs will come in, they'll pitch you, they'll bring in the big partners, and then all of a sudden you get sort of the junior guy. And sometimes the junior guy is well educated, or he's a excellent finance guy, or he comes from Stanford, but they've never really run a business before. They've never really been in the fight, and I talk a lot about chaos, but I think one of the things is you have to be able to embrace chaos. And I find a lot with some of the venture capital group, they come in, they see it's interesting, and then once they invest, they want to change you. And it's this constant battle to, what makes you who you are, what makes you unique, what drives this is because you are different. And at the end of the day, you don't necessarily need to be professionally managed, and you don't have to essentially, conform. And I think if you find the right venture capital group that's got some history, that's been around, that's worked with some startup companies, then you're away. You get the wrong one, it could destroy the company.
Well, and Jay, you guys lasted a long time without taking outside money, right? Like 8 years?
Yeah, that's amazing. Good.
Well, I actually think we're in Winnipeg, we're in the Prairies, knowing where you are and you leveraging the advantages that we have here is, I can't tell you how many times I've heard from investors in all over the world saying, holy cow, you built a profitable company from day one, like no investment, nope, not even a bank loan, nope. No line of credit. No, we just.
But what does
we
that
just
mean,
work.
Jay, when you say like use what we have here?
We have amazing tax credits, resources, like leverage every grant and tax credit you can, because that's free money and they don't need a board seat and they don't get a percentage of your company. You got to fill out a couple forms, but so leverage all of those advantages. We have great organizations here. Like, we didn't plug into them early enough. I think we maybe were like 30 people and we just had our heads down and out nailed a Shane and we're just working, and then all of a sudden, thankfully, companies like New Media Manitoba, I think, was the first one that ever reached out and like, hey, what can we help you with? And then it was like all the others, and we're like, wow, there's great resources here. I think in like San Francisco, they don't have maybe all that, but they have a really strong investor community. So let's just realize what we have here and leverage it. And the things we have here are really hardworking people that are loyal. A couple of years ago, Facebook had one of like the best employee retention rates, and it was 1.2 years. Like that's not good, but that's what's considered good out there, because they look at working at different companies as that's how they move up the career path, right? They don't find a company and stay at it. That happens here too, but it's generally longer than that. So you're able to go deep with people, go long, build great things, and be super competitive. So I think leverage that, and then by all means, like raising is good. We just raised last year, and it was because we felt we were putting gas on the fire, not starting the fire, and that's how we kind of said, okay, we feel comfortable with it. So.
And Carly, having been 18 months, so you guys have recently been through this like early growth and being a startup. Do you have advice that feels fresh from having just kind of been through it?
Well, I don't know if this is fresh. I would really reiterate on what Jay said. Like, the tax credits here are amazing. The grants are amazing. I think just take advantage. You don't have to go raise, venture capital or even raise capital at all to start a company, especially here. So try and do non-dilutive funding if you can, and look to creative sources like that.
I can say two things. One is I meet these young founders, and they're so excited about the tech. It's tech, and they need to be equally excited about the sales and the marketing and the business side. And often those things are kind of afterthoughts because they get so jacked about what they're trying to do, and there needs to be a way yet to monetize that and so on. And then other advice I gave, while it's not, well, I'll say it's important to get advice from learned people like the group here, is talk to people that tried and didn't make it, and find out what they didn't do. I mean, there's a large element of luck definitely in our business, but there's no shortage of hardworking, smart people with ideas that are willing to do whatever it takes. But then talk to those to say, okay, you did this, you invested, all of your savings in 5 years of your life, and it didn't work out. Why didn't it work out? And try to learn as much from those as from us.
Yeah, I think talking about failures has become something really popular now, right? There's events all about that, F-up nights and different things that happen so that people can showcase that, and it's kind of like a moment of pride now. And Jay, you talked briefly earlier about having to kill projects, and that's something that you find trouble with. So there's still that iteration of failure even when your company is formed, right?
And it's even harder because when you're starting, like, you have to succeed. And once you have a number of products and you're like a decent size, you get a little bit, it's easy to get complacent. Like, if you just said, we have X amount in the bank account, we have to make this succeed, it's different. Because it's easy to think, oh, we'll just keep funding it. And so sometimes when we have to shut down a product, teams are always kind of like, oh, well, why? I'm like, well, it's just not working, and we're gonna, shift. And usually people are good with it, but sometimes it really stings deep. I just want to touch on you had a really good point about sales. I believe that so much because it's sexy to say we're a product company, we're a product first company, and the best products win. And I have this really fun story of one of our products is Kick Booster. It's an affiliate software for crowdfunding on Kickstarter, and we partnered with a guy originally to do it, and he came to us with this idea, and he had this, it looked like a legitimate working product, but it was like a landing page, and he had sold $10,000 worth. I think it was $299 per, and he sold $10,000 of people signing up for it. And then we said, oh, well, great. So how far are you on the product? He's like, actually nothing. I just made a landing page, some copy. I'm going to refund everybody, but I wanted to prove the idea first. And that's what you should do. A lot of people will spend a year trying to build a product and then go out and sell it. Put up a landing page. You know what? You'll pay the 2 point whatever % when you refund it, but that's the best way to validate an idea and we got to flip it sometimes. We got to put the sales first and then build for the product, and we get it backwards way too much.
The other advice that we hear often on the show, on the podcast, when we introduce different guests is that you really do just need to like tell people what you're doing. I think often there's this idea of like hiding what you have because you're worried about people stealing it.
Stealth.
Right, but if your heart's in it and you're moving forward with it, no one's gonna all of a sudden stop the amazing thing they're doing to get yours. And if they do, like, okay, bad luck, but like the chances of it happening compared to the chances of someone helping you, helping with that iteration, telling you where you're going is actually not the right way so you can pivot before you've invested all this time and money, right? And that's something that we hear frequently on the show.
Yeah. And I mean, I love what you just said. I think sometimes you have to be willing to piss people off a little bit. So for example, with us, we were kind of trying to decide whether we should launch in French, and we figured there would be demand, but we didn't want to go out and recruit and get French books and all that. So we said, like, anyone want to try Hoot reading in French? And we did some marketing around it, and suddenly we had all these people wanting Hoot reading in French, and we didn't have any teachers, and we didn't have any books, and we were sort of like, sorry, we said we would sell that to you, but we actually won't yet. We'll launch it in 2 months. And then we knew we could invest in building out that product.
Yeah. Okay, so you guys have gotten pretty good now at growing your businesses, seeing challenges, overcoming them. So you've probably come to a point where you're a little bit better at anticipating maybe what some of the challenges are coming next. Tell us a bit about where you guys are at and what you see as the next challenge for you.
Man, well, I mean, so our goal was to disrupt the agronomic element. So in that part where we compete against companies like Monsanto or John Deere or DuPont Pioneer, but the goal for us is to get on the farm, capture the data, the information, and then move towards disrupting other verticals that are connected to agriculture. So kind of like a e-commerce strategy to a degree. Like we see, crop insurance is like the most archaic business in the world. It's crazy how it runs. And so we see a lot of things that we do will move into crop insurance, farm finance, grain marketing and contracting. And so really something very different than what we do today, but the foundation in order to go in is that. And it's funny because we compete against these big companies on this agronomic space, but there's really nobody in, disrupting or doing work in these other verticals. But yet they're still sort of covered by huge companies like Zurich Re and all these big insurance groups and Rabobank and stuff. So that, I mean, I think that's our next big challenge will be going from kind of helping farmers make decisions about what variety they should use to essentially how they should better insure their crops kind of real time.
We're 100% focused on growth right now, so really building our brand and getting more people to know about Hoot Reading so that they will then use Hoot Reading. I actually don't think that's our biggest challenge, though. That's just marketing capital. Ultimately, our challenge is growing the teachers to meet that growth, growing the teacher side. And when we started, it was literally my or my's kids read with every teacher as part of the interview process. We, now our teachers' kids read with every teacher. This is not scalable. So figuring out how we can scale from the human side and keep the quality where it is something that we think about a lot.
I think our challenge is we've grown consistently to the point where we now view we have a solid foundation. So the question is, can we now scale aggressively from this foundation? And so that'll be our challenge.
I think for us, this is a little bit abstract, but we know exactly where we want to go, like I would say 5 years from now. So we have a compass, but not a map, and making the right decisions as we go to navigate. Like we know where we want to go, how we get there is a different story. And that's something I think is our biggest challenge and our biggest opportunity, but getting there in a way that works in all the ecosystems we play in, with all the partners we play with, different technologies. Like we have to navigate a lot of, we're partners, but we're frenemies with different partners. It's an interesting space being in tech. It's like you have Apple and Amazon, they work together, but they also this. And so we have a lot of situations like that we have to think strategically about. And then just on a daily basis, like what do we say no to? What do we start? What do we stop? What do we continue? Being smart about these decisions. Like that's really what I think our biggest challenge and opportunity is now.
Is that something that you guys have all kind of focused on over time? There's a lot of people that talk about kind of having these yes/no lists, even individual humans, of things that they are prepared to be as part of their personal brand. Like, I wouldn't want to be affiliated with smoking, even if it's, if there's a big contract or the partner's willing to give us a lot of money because we don't believe in that. Have you kind of made those lists of yeses and nos of things that you would be willing to partner with, or is it just organic and it's developed over time?
Well, ours are technology partnerships, so it's not. There has been some that we've drawn the line. There's definitely been ones that we morally we don't agree with. But like from a technology side, as long as there's mutual value being created by the part, but like they might be a competitor, but we also integrate. So there's always these weird dynamics because we have such a large suite of products. We have one that's competing, but this one isn't, so we want to integrate these, but it's a weird space because we're not a single product company. So it's not like we won't service companies that sell drugs or something like that. It's more like from a competitive standpoint, which ones do we work with?
I think from our side, it's the protection of the farmer's information and data. I mean, the type of information that we get on a daily basis, we know, what the farmer plants, how much fertilizer he puts on, what his yields are. We know all of this stuff, which is pretty intimate. And so the farmer puts a significant amount of trust that we won't take that data and use it in a way that injures them. So as an example, if we were to take that information and give it to a grain company that could essentially trade against the farmer, but yet at the same time, the farmer is also very partnered with the grain company, and there's a kind of a unique experience. Like we have a very strong partnership with Richardson's, and Richardson's also have they are kind of the trusted advisor for the grower, and so when we go out and work with the grower has to kind of give permission to give his information to the Richardson agronomist to help him make decisions. But there's a really fine line, and we think in agriculture, there's going to be, a lot of big issues that are going to come from the data. And so, like today, when a farmer buys a brand new John Deere tractor, John Deere says that the information that comes off that tractor doesn't belong to the farmer; it belongs to John Deere. And when you think about all the things that'll be used in the future, so we have to be very careful. Yep. And I don't think you really want to be on the wrong side of the data ownership side of it. So.
Well, and Chuck, you're coming from cybersecurity aspect of things, so this probably sparks something for you.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, there's so many different ways that creative people, both good and bad, try to get at data and so on. And so I can see that being one of your key things. I think for us, we have our core values very well defined in terms of what's important to us and what's not. And so if we had a customer come to us, or a potential customer with something that we felt uncomfortable with, we would just pass. Yeah. But we don't have a list of it per se.
Okay, so I do also want to ask you guys just a couple personal, right before we finish here. You are all leaders of these companies, founders of these companies. Personal growth, professional growth has, of course, been something that you've paid attention to. At this point in time, do you have any books, resources, a really cool app that you use to keep your time managed? What is that thing that you can tell to our listeners so that they can try and get some of that wisdom from you?
I'll tell you the 3 biggest books that shaped a lot of stuff at Bold. Drive by Daniel Pink, and that's all about intrinsic motivation, what motivates people, why do some people do amazing work. Read it, it's really good. Measure What Matters, recently that's John Doerr, and he's all about OKRs, objectives and key results. That really helped us set a framework for how we set goals and measure them. And then not just us, but every single person at the company can now set their own goals, align them with a company goal. They can walk to work and say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to set my own goal. As long as it moves a main goal forward, it's very empowering for everyone to be able to have that. So that's called Measure What Matters. And then the other one was, Radical Candor by Kim Scott. I don't know, we read that a couple years ago, and I'm working on having hard conversations, and that book is helping me. So anyways, and I just read last week The Infinite Game from Simon Sinek. If anyone hasn't read that, highly, highly recommend it.
Thanks, Jay.
It's really good.
Do you have any?
I mean, I wouldn't say that of a book. I mean, the thing that probably has been the most helpful for me is, having really strong board members that I kind of lean on for. So I wouldn't say it is a book, but I mean, I'm pretty lucky. I have a former CFO of ADM and the former president of DuPont Pioneer, the former who's no longer on the board, but head of Agricor. So I've been just, that would be, lunch meetings with those folks or phone calls have been.
Yeah, that's good advice too, though. Just don't forget to ask the people that you have around you, right? We've got great people in this room. We've got great people around us, and sometimes we forget to kind of extend that ask.
Yeah, I'll go a little bit of a different direction, not a business book. It's called Reader Come Home by Marianne Wolf, and it's all about how we as a society aren't really reading books anymore and why we should. So I recommend it.
There's a book called Scaling Up in terms of how to organize your business to make it scale. I think that's a good read for almost any entrepreneur. And then in terms of things, I read a diverse number of things, but the one thing I read almost every week is from the Farnham Street website, their Brain Food, and it has lots of nuggets of other things to read.
Nice. Okay. And to wrap it up, if our listeners want to get in contact with you guys or learn more about your businesses, where should they go?
Boldcommerce.com, and my name is Jay, so you can probably guess my email. Jay, I don't know, that's probably the best place. I could give you all my social, but honestly, feel free if anyone wants to email me with any questions or check out our website, it's boldcommerce.com.
Yeah, check out our website, just Google Farmer's Edge and it'll pop up pretty quick. So.
Hoot Reading. I'm Carly at hootreading.com, and we would love to offer any parents in the room who want to try Hoot Reading or teachers 50% off. So make sure you email me directly off of your first month, only your first month. So feel free to email me if you want to give us a try.
And our website's by far the best way to understand. And obsglobal.com is the website.
Great. Thank you all for being on our show today and for being part of our live taping. And thank you to our audience here at Disrupted.
Yeah, that was great.
If you enjoyed today's episode and want to learn more about our guests and the community, visit us at startpodcast.ca.
Please be sure to subscribe and review today on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you're listening. This way, you'll never miss an episode.
Start, an Innovation Alley podcast, is produced by your hosts, Matt and Margaux Miller, with editing and graphics by Relish. The podcast is powered by North Forge and recorded in Winnipeg's Innovation Alley,
Where the startup community is strong and thriving, and where we look forward to one day seeing you start.
Now, is Margaux Miller not one to watch? Can you not see that she's going to be running some big talk show or something? You did a great job.
Thank you,
Fabulous
Tony.
job. Great energy. You guys were good. I mean, you only built amazing businesses, but your energy was fantastic. You guys were all fantastic.
Thank you.
I wasn't being disparaging. I was trying to make her look I could just feel the daggers. No, I wasn't really talking about you. I was talking about her. Okay, good. Get off my stage.
Good. We're going.
Note.
Jeez.